Alright, welcome back ladies and gentlemen to the Chupacabra Tutorials channel. I'm your host, Larry the Chupacabra, and today we're going to be talking about how to set up some advanced recording settings here in OBS Studio Edition. So if you pop open settings and go to output, there's a couple of tabs up here at the top that goes over output mode. The blah 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 blah. I'm not wording very well as it gets later in the evening. But you'll notice that here, the simple type is what we went over before for the basic output setup. And the one that I like to use is the advanced, which allows you to really dig into the nitty-gritty of how all of your encoding and video recording is laid out so that you can control the quality to the finest degree. So the first tab is the streaming tab. And for the most part, you can leave the audio track setting alone. One of the things that OBS lets you do since it went into the Studio Edition, formerly known as the Multi-Platform Edition, is allows you to natively separate out your audio tracks to make it really easy to record them and then edit them later by separating them so that your mic audio isn't mixed in with your background audio from your game, making it nearly impossible to trim it, adjust it, and edit it. And basically, this is very similar to what your simple settings are. You've got the encoder type that you're going to use for exporting to Twitch or YouTube or wherever, and most people will recommend that you use the X264 encoder, which is the one that's built into your computer's CPU, because it's a lot more reliable when making really quick, really highly compressed videos that are going to be sent out to the web for use on a streaming platform. If you were going to be doing this for local recording, you'd want the NVENC H.264, or if you were trying to eke out as much of the performance as you can from your computer because it's kind of on the cusp of exploding. And then, of course, down here in for streaming service encoder settings, definitely leave this on because that's going to make sure that your encoding doesn't explode when it tries to, send way more data than your connection can handle. And then if you find that your connection doesn't handle a larger video file very well, or the game would look better at a smaller resolution, you can downscale your output natively just right here in this tab to something like 1280 by 720, or even smaller to 1960 by 540. Pretty much all of these sizes are very standard, and you could get away with doing them just fine. They're the native 16 by 9 resolutions that Twitch and YouTube and all that can handle pretty easily. But I don't really need to do that on my computer, well, computers, so I'm going to disable that for the moment. When it comes to streaming, you're going to want to leave your rate control to CBR, and what CBR stands for is constant bitrate. And basically what that means is no matter what setting you've got it to, and I'm going to actually up this to 3,500 kilobits per second, or 3.5 megabits per second for the bitrate. These are always measured in kilobits per second, and most of the video recorders and streamers that you're going to play around with is constant bitrate means it will be set at that flat bitrate and it will never go beyond or higher than 3,500. If I change it to VBR, variable bitrate, that will then go above 3,500 if there's a scene or a moment in the video with a lot of shit going on, a lot of movement. It'll actually jump way above that 3,500 mark and can lag out your connection and cause buffering or just for you to disconnect from the server altogether. So for most things, you're going to want to leave it to CBR for the rate control. Use around 3,500 for your bitrate. That's what Twitch recommends. You can go as high as 6 megabits per second, but unless you're a partnered streamer on Twitch, they're not necessarily going to let you do that. And it's going to buffer a lot for most of the people trying to watch your stream. So leave it at 3,500 or a bit below. You can set up using a custom buffer size to buffer your video more. And if you know when you want to use that and why, because someone suggested it to you on, say, the support forums, you can. Otherwise, I'd suggest leaving that alone. And then down here, you've got some things like the recording profile. I recommend using a high recording profile or a main recording profile. You can also just select none. It'll just go for a baseline recording profile. And basically, a recording profile is just looking to prioritize either quality or performance, or just not use up a lot of your performance. And then for tuning, you can set this as like an animation style or whatever, but I'd leave that at none. And you don't really need to use the variable frame rate again because it's going to horse up your stream. And if you want to use variable frame rate, you'd normally use that, or that's VFR, but VFR is similar to that. It's just a different type of way that they handle encoding, which we'll go into in the recording tab up here. So just leave the stuff down here at the bottom alone. Maybe set your profile to main, high, or baseline, depending on your connection. It can definitely handle main and baseline. So maybe just leave that at main. And if you're having a lot of lag while you record or while you stream, set your CPU preset to ultra fast or super fast. It usually starts out at very fast. So next up, we've got the recordings tab. So the recordings for people like myself who do a lot of YouTube is going to be your primary bread and butter. And what I've got set up here, and let's just set these to some more default settings. We'll use the default encoder. What we've got here is you're just going to have a standard type of video recording. You can do a fancy type of video recording if you install a tool called FFmpeg, which will allow you to encode in a wide variety of video types with a wide variety of encoding types. But I actually don't recommend using that tool unless you're a much more advanced, like a pro OBS user, because that can actually cause glitches, bugs, and crashes in OBS, especially if you don't keep it up to date very often. So basically all this is you can determine where your videos are going to be recorded to. Currently, when I was making this, I was doing other video tutorials on Discord. So that's set to tutorials 3. Go away, Overwatch. No one cares. And then down here you have the recording format. The default recording format is MP4. You can also record in a Flash video file type, an Apple MOV, a Windows MKV, a TS, or an M3U8. If you want to know more about these two down here, you can just Google it. I don't remember the specifics. I just remember they're used a lot in DVD encoding. So I'm going to leave that at MP4, and currently I am using 3 audio tracks because it's possible inside of OBS to record and separate your audio out into a maximum of 4 different audio channels. So that's what I'm going to go over in part today. Next up, we've got the encoder. So the encoder is the brain inside of your computer that is going to be used to record your video. Now, sometimes encoders refer to your computer's brain, and other times they refer to the type of codec that you're going to use. And codecs are like a little computer algorithm piece of information that tells a computer how to use a certain set of technology to record a type of video. Both of these encoders will record an MP4 video or whatever you select. The default one for most people is the X264 encoder, which will use your CB or blah 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 blah. Let me have a little sip of beverage here to moisten my lips. That's better for the dry throat. So both of these encoders will record an MP4 video, also known as an X264 video or H264. The regular X264 will use your CPU, which can put a bit of a drain on your computer's performance while you're recording or streaming. And the other option is to use your graphics card's built-in codec, which is usually proprietary to either NVIDIA or AMD. I have NVIDIA, so I would be using the NVENC H264 encoder, and that will basically tell OBS to go into my computer and go to my graphics card, and my graphics card will just save out an extra copy of whatever's going on the screen and just turn it into a video. And it's incredibly low performance loss. It's great. Like, you don't even notice it. And it's my preferred method of doing recording. And then if you need to downscale your recording for whatever reason, you can do that here with Rescale. And then if you want to add a custom muxer setting, you can do that here. Again, that can be kind of technical. If you need to use that, usually someone will tell you why. And you can look up more information about that on your own. It's basically how they do like the rendering and the sharpening when you downscale and all that stuff. So down here is how let's just leave this at X264 for argument's sake. Now this is going to look a lot like it did over in streaming. So when you're recording, you probably want to set your settings to record as high a quality as possible. And then you don't need to add this tuning stuff because you like little effects and everything. But you want the profile to be on high because that means it's going to record a high profile video with a big bit rate that will be very good quality. And if you're using CBR or VBR, you want to bump your bit rate up to something like 35,000 to upwards of 55,000 megabits or kilobits per second, which is 55 megabits per second. And just to keep this in mind, what the quality controls are, YouTube recommends when after they've like crunched your video into the size of a pea, that you upload your videos at 8 megabits per second. If you want to make sure you have a lot of quality to play with when you're editing and when you're messing around with it on your computer before you upload it, it's nice to record an almost lossless video at around 55 megabits per second so that you have lots of quality to fuck around with, and then you upload it, and then YouTube can crunch it down into a minuscule size, and then that's when you'll see the most amount of quality loss. So you don't really need to use a custom buffer size unless your computer's having issues, but CRF is the quality control preset, and that goes as high as 25. A lot of people recommend you leave it at like 23, which is the default. I haven't really been able to pin down anybody who says why, but you can just leave that alone. And then keyframe intervals are a very technical sounding thing. Just leave that at auto. There's very specific reasons why you'd want to change that. And again, it's one of those things you'd know if you needed to. Then down here you have the CPU preset. If you're using the default X264 preset to record with your CPU and you see yourself lagging, jump that up to ultra fast. It'll make things really great and easy to handle, and you won't have to worry about it. And the quality loss is minuscule. And then you probably want to use variable frame rate because that's just the best. Variable frame rate and variable bit rate. I know you want it to be 60 FPS, which is why you went down here and set it to 60 in your video tab. But this just makes your video smoother and it makes it less janky when you're trying to record. Now, my preference when I record is I set my encoder to NVENC, and then I set my rate control to CQP, which is one of the better recorders. If I was doing, say, whoops, I want that to stay at M before. If I was doing X264 and I wanted this to be the absolute maximum quality, I'd probably use CRF. These things are basically just different rate controllers that control how the video gets compressed as it gets recorded. The best one is probably CRF, which has a variable rate, so it compresses some frames or some scenes in your video more than others because more stuff is going on and they're taking up more space. Other ones like VBR and CBR compress everything at the exact same rate or very similarly same rate. And when I go down to NVENC, I'm using a rate control called CQP, which compresses everything at roughly the same rate simply because NVIDIA doesn't give you the option to have CFR. So the only other option would be lossless, which can be a humongous file type, which I just don't want to spend a lot of time doing. It lags out your recorders, it lags out your video editors. It can be a bit of a pain in the butt, even with really good hardware. So unless you have to do that, I just don't. So I just leave it at CQP, which is a very nice, it's basically the highest quality that you're going to get for this. And then for the CQP preset, I'm going to set it to 25. I'm going to leave the keyframe do whatever it wants to do because the computer's smarter about that than I am. I'm going to set the preset to high quality. You can also set it to Blu-ray, but Blu-ray, I believe, makes it record in a slightly different file format, which might not be compatible with everything. So I'm just going to leave that at high quality. I'm going to leave the profile to high, and then I'm going to set the level to auto because it'll automatically pick the recording level that it feels is best. And then 2-pass encoding means that it's going to look at every single frame twice in order to determine if it's really the best that it can be. And then everything else I just leave at default because I know I probably could remember what these two are used for, but I'm just not going to horse around with it. And if you want to use NVENC and you see yourself having a slight dip in performance because you're using like an older 980 graphics card from NVIDIA or something similar, you can actually dump this 2-pass encoding setting and just let it be a 1-pass, which is completely fine. Not even I would probably see too much more quality from doing a 2-pass rather than a 1-pass. And that's basically how you do this. If you're using something like AMD and you're not sure what settings to do for AMD, if you want to use the AMD encoder because there's an AMD version of NVENC, I don't know how to set that up, but there are plenty of tutorials in text form on the internet, including the one where I originally read when I started using this one, that have settings to use for both the Intel QuickSync encoder and also for the AMD encoder. I forget what it's called. So, now that you've got all these things set up, you'll notice here that I have the ability to record multiple audio tracks into their own separate little audio tracks so I can edit them separately after the fact. In order to enable this, I need to do a couple of things. The first thing I do is under my recording output, I need to enable all of the audio tracks that I want to use. This isn't a single check, this is 3. You enable each audio track independently of the other 3. There's a total of 4 different audio tracks that you can see right here, and you can name them each individual things based upon what you want them to be. So I can say this is the mic track. Whoops, I want this to be 320. The higher the bitrate, the better. I want this to be the background music. And then I want track 3 to be my co-host. And so once you've got the audio tracks that you want to use selected, I use 3. I would select 1, 2, 3, and leave number 4 unchecked. I go over to audio, make sure they're all set to 320 kilobits per second for their bitrate, which is the highest that they'll go. And then I click OK. And if you're not sure how many that you need, it's basically however many audio devices that you have enabled in your audio settings. I've got a desktop device for my headset. I have a secondary headset that I can send audio to record my co-host. And then I have my regular microphone. So I have 3 audio devices plugged in. I have them enabled in my audio devices. And now on the front page where you set up your video scene source, you can go into Mixer and then you can select which audio track each one of them gets sent to. So by default, all of the audio devices are being written to every single audio track. What you have to do is unselect all of these different little checkboxes so that nothing is being recorded, and then you tell each individual device which audio track you want it to be recorded to. So I said, the first audio track I want to be my microphone. The second audio track I want to be my first desktop audio device, which is my basic headset, which will receive my computer sound, my game sound. And then the second desktop audio device will be my co-host, and he will be going to number 3. So now each one of them is going to their own audio track, and you have to be careful whenever you add a new audio device or change audio devices. These will all default to recording all of the same audio to all the different audio tracks, which is obviously worthless. So once that's done, you can start recording. And if you look over here, inside of my Premiere Pro, if I grab one of these test audio tracks and I minimize everything, you can see that I have 3 separate audio tracks. My microphone, the background sound from my computer, and also my co-host, which is currently not enabled. And then I can just open this up. I can send this to Adobe Audition. I can run it through my preset. If I click in, is it going to Audition? Okay, it's right here. I can go into favorites. I can go to Larry Compressor to compress it with my preset, which is also available in another tutorial on the channel you can find if you look in the video description probably. And there you have my audio preset used. And now if I save this and go back to Premiere, my audio is nicely leveled. So all of my voice is at the same level and it's really easy to hear me. The background noise is cut out and it's really easy to work with from there. And then the background audio, the audio from, say, in this case, this was the gameplay for Dark Souls 3 for the basic tutorial. You can see that it's in its own separate audio track and it's touched by my editor. So it doesn't sound garbled, distorted, or whatever, because that audio has already been balanced and treated by the company that makes Dark Souls 3 from software, so I shouldn't need to manipulate it. It's already ready to go. I just have to control how loud it is for YouTube. And that's basically the advanced recording tutorial for OBS. The only thing I didn't really go over is messing around with scene transitions, scene collections, setting up different profiles. That's all stuff that's really easy for you to play around with at home, and you can dig deeper into this to become an OBS master as you just kind of experiment with stuff, break stuff, fix stuff, whatever. And if you find yourself in need of any additional information on anything that I covered here today, go ahead and throw that information into the comments below, because I'm sure I missed something, or just kind of skipped over it because I didn't remember it completely because it wasn't that important. So if you want any further details on anything, just ask. If you have any questions, ask. If you run into any hiccups, just ask. Worst case scenario, I just send you to the OBS help forums because I'm not quite sure what solution is the best one for you, and they can usually help you figure it out a lot faster than I can. So that's it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. I've been your host, Larry the Chupacabra. This has been the advanced OBS setup tutorial that included how to separate your audio tracks into separate different audio channels. That makes it easier to edit later, including how to set up the NVENC codec for local recording. Hope you've enjoyed, hope you found this useful, and I'll catch you guys and gals next time. Bye, everybody!